Hello everyone, the time is now 12 Eastern. Thanks for joining us today. In today's webinar, we're going to cover multi-dimensional reporting with Cognos Workspace Advanced. So hopefully there's a lot of Analysis Studio users who are just starting to consider transitioning over to the new strategic multi-dimensional reporting tool, Cognos Workspace Advanced. This webinar will be the right one for you. My name is Jesse McDelty. I'm a Business Development Manager here at LPA. With me I have Rich Chester, our Director of Consulting. If you've attended any of our previous webinars, you will recognize Rich's voice. Today's webinar is being recorded, so we'll provide a playback URL immediately following it. So if you do lose audio or if you have to leave early, you'll be able to watch this again. Also, please ask any questions you have via the chat window. We have a lot of content, so if you don't get to your question, you can we'll respond to you via the chat window at the end, or we'll send you an email after the event with responses. Today's webinar is part of our larger webinar and workshop series. For a complete calendar of events, go to lpa.com/events. The current slide highlights some of our upcoming events. On our website, you can also find playbacks from prior events, such as an introduction to Cognos Workspace Advanced. You can also visit our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/LPA Systems, where you can see all of our previous event recordings. You can also subscribe there and be alerted every time we upload new webinar recordings. At LPA, we help our customers envision and implement innovative IBM business analytics solutions that enable you to find exactly what you need to know. We were founded in 2001. We're headquartered in Rochester, New York, have offices in Dallas, Houston, and more importantly, consultants throughout the United States. We work with hundreds of customers from our Fortune 50 customers all the way down to small and mid-market. With 20 employees. We also help Cognos OEMs that are actually implementing Cognos as part of solutions we're delivering to their customers. Our partners are IBM. We are our premier business partner, which is in the top 6% of partners out there. We're also an Esri Silver Tier partner. Esri can be used for location analytics. If you want to learn more about Esri, check out our website. We have extensive business analytics consulting experience. All of our consultants are certified. We have over 60 certifications. Our consultants have been working with Cognos since the Series 7 days. We have expertise from initially starting and building data warehouses up through the business intelligence, P&L planning and budgeting, financial performance management, all the way into predictive analytics with SPSS. And in 2013, we received an IBM Beacon Award finalist from IBM for a healthcare analytics solution. For business analytics consulting offerings, we have 4 different areas. The first is our advisory services. So this is really consulting expertise and guidance. So for example, we offer BI strategy and roadmap offering where we can come on site if you're just getting started, do an assessment of your environment, and help you build your roadmap internally, help align to your corporate objectives. We do BICC assessments so you can see where your organization fits in your industry. If we move to the implementation side of things, our most common implementation offering is Cognos upgrades. So, we do dozens of upgrades per year. We're experts at doing upgrades. We know what breaks and what doesn't. So if you're considering an upgrade and you haven't done one before, call us in to talk to us about upgrades. We also do full project lifecycle. So if you've got a project that needs everything from data warehousing all the way through reporting and discovery, we can do that from end to end for you. The next pillar is our training offerings. Today's webinar is actually based off of our training offerings. We offer Cognos training across the board, customized with your data. So report studio class, we actually modify our materials to use your data. So when your users are actually learning the tool, they're learning it in the context of your data. So you're hitting two birds with one stone, receive brilliant feedback from end users. It's also priced very competitively. It's probably about half the price if you compare it to sending someone to, for example, some IBM public training courses. We're also IBM renewal and license experts. So next time a renewal comes up, give us the opportunity to give you a quote. We might be able to save you some money. We can also give you some recommendations on ways of trading up so you can better leverage your time in this environment. So that's what we're going to be demonstrating using the latest version of Cognos. I want to highlight our upgrade assessment. As I said earlier, LCA does dozens of upgrades per year. We're currently offering a no-cost upgrade assessment. So this is where we'll work with you, look at your environment, I'll come up with a work breakdown structure and round estimates for what's going to take for you to actually convert. With that, we'll have an understanding what types of remediations you think you're going to need. So for example, what reports are going to break? We'll also provide you license recommendations. We'll give you a slide deck that gives you a summary of benefits versus your current version that you could use to help build an internal business case. Provide training recommendations for your Cognos team, and also proposals. Okay, on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Rich Chester for our demo. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Jesse. Good day, everybody. So our agenda today is I'm going to first talk to you about the difference between writing reports using a relational style versus the dimensional style. Follow that up to talk a bit about the dimensional sources that are available to you as BI owners. I'm going to give you a vocabulary lesson, a couple of slides of dimensional reporting specific vocabulary. I'm going to show you how to read a dimensional package, specifically one of the two views of the dimensional packages that are available. And then we're going to do a demonstration. We're going to do some authoring. I'm going to go over some of the concepts that were in the slides. And then if there's time at the end, we're going to take some questions and hopefully provide some answers so that you walk away with a notion of what it takes to use a dimensional package to write a report using Cognos Workspace Advanced. So if you read the documentation from IBM on CWA or Report Studio, you're going to find that documentation is actually broken up into two sections. One for the relational style of report authoring and the other for the dimensional style. Because even though you are using the very same tool, the way you write reports is a bit different, and there are different concepts for both. So let me go over the differences between the two to see if I can highlight why the styles are different. So first of all, the data sources are different between the two styles. So in the relational style, the data sources tend to be Oracle database, SQL Server database, DB2 database, Informix database, rows and columns and tables. Reasonably flat. In other words, it's two-dimensional, not three-dimensional or n-dimensional. Let's contrast that with the data sources for a dimensional report. The data sources for a dimensional report have been modeled and built to express your data in a multi-dimensional way, a hierarchical way, a way where using business concepts, which we'll call dimensions, you can address intersections that contain measures to allow you to find interesting intersections, which can highlight opportunities, can highlight issues, can highlight good things in your organization. So the dimensional style depends on you using a dimensional data source. People will call these cubes, they'll call them OLAP data sources, it's all the same thing. It's hierarchical expression of your business concepts to address intersections in a cube that contain interesting measures. Picture this, picture a Rubik's Cube. Now, a Rubik's Cube is a three-dimensional object, and it's made up of little tiny cubes. And each of those little tiny cubes, those intersections, has a unique address, if you will, an X, a Y, and a Z number, to address one individual little tiny Rubik's Cube, little sub-cube. Think of a Rubik's Cube as an OLAP data source that has three dimensions, an X and a Y and a Z. And each of those addresses a specific intersection, one of those little mini-cubes, in which I could store a measure. Conceptually, that's what a cube is. It's a collection of dimensions that I use to address certain intersections that contain interesting measures about my business. On the relational side, a two-dimensional object is best expressed in a two-dimensional report. And therefore, most of the relational data reports that we write are going to result in lists, group lists with totals on the bottom, for example, of each group. On the other hand, dimensional data is most often expressed in a crosstab or in a chart. Charts are really just pictures of crosstabs, right? Instead of rows and columns, you have series and categories, but otherwise they're essentially the same. Now, this isn't to say that I can't express relational data in a crosstab or a chart. Indeed, when I do that, Cognos actually converts my relational data to a cube behind the scenes, and then addresses that data like a cube to populate the crosstab. You don't know that's happening. For most authors, you don't have to know that's happening, but literally that is going on in the background. With a cube, those numbers go directly to being expressed in a crosstab or a chart without conversion. And then summaries, like I said before, in lists show up at the bottom of groups in a group list, or even at the bottom of a list. In a crosstab with dimensional data, these show up at the edge of sets, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, but I hope by the end of this conversation will. And in terms of filtering, there are very big differences. With relational style, I filter with detail filters, by and large, sometimes summary filters. But with a dimensional report, I have this new notion of filtering by sets. Filtering by sets could manifest as me picking these 3 product lines to include on my report and no others. It could be by using a context filter, which is a set of information that focuses my report, and so on. So I don't, generally speaking, use detail filters with my dimensional style like I do with my relational style. I have a lot of other filtering options available to me when my source is an OLAP source and I'm writing with the dimensional style. Now, with your BI investment came up to 3 cube technologies. And I say up to 3 because in 2014, if you are buying Cognos for the first time under the newest licensing levels, the middle technology, Power Cubes, would actually not be licensed in that scenario. So while I expect that a lot of you on the phone have been Cognos users for more than a couple of months, for those of you who are brand spanking new to Cognos, Power Cubes are probably not part of your license pack. But let me go over these 3 technologies that you had access to that come out of the box with most BI investment. The first one, and the newest one, is dynamic cubes. These are memory resident cubes that are living in the memory on your Cognos servers. They read in relational data that's been organized and laid out in the database in a star or a snowflake schema. This technology runs on top of the dynamic query mode engine, which means it's a 64-bit engine that takes great advantage of memory and of caching. So this is for high data volume cubes, reading your relational data, and you can actually set these up to refresh their copy of the database data in memory in near real time. So when we talk about data latency, how old is the data versus what the live data is, this can be relatively low latency objects. They're also aggregate aware, which makes them unique versus the other relational type technology, DMR. These are so clever that if you have a summarized table in your database where you, let's say, summarize data by product and year, and you have the detailed data that can satisfy literally any report request, and that's down by product and day. When you write a report that's by product and year, Cognos can auto-rewrite your report to use the pre-aggregated data in that aggregate table. And then when you write a report at a lower level, it will flip over automatically to the other physical table without the report author having to know or care. So you can see how that could increase throughput. The memory resident increases throughput, being 64-bit increases throughput. We have a whole hour on dynamic cubes that's available on our YouTube channel as well as available for download off of our website if you want to have a deeper dive into dynamic cubes. So that is one of the 3, and maybe the newest of the 3 technologies available to you as a BI customer. Power cubes are probably the most mature technology from the point of view they've been around even before Cognos 8. They are a separate copy of your data, so these would be considered to high latency. The data is only as fresh as the last time you built the Power Cubes. Dynamic cubes are modeled with a new tool called Cube Designer. Power Cubes are modeled with a tool called Transformer. Think of Transformer as both a modeling tool and an ETL tool. Not only do I express what my cube should look like, it also builds my cube and allows me to build this MDC file on a schedule and make it available to the Cognos server, and then I can write reports against that MDC file. It is optimized for this kind of OLAP reporting style. Because it is a separate copy, it's not relational data. Dynamic cubes are also organized in memory in a similar fashion, so they're optimized for OLAP access. Power cubes for lower medium data volume, separate copy of the data, so you have to think that latency is not an issue when you use a Power cube, right? That looking at data that might be a day old is okay. It's a good technology, it's part of your arsenal. The third part of your arsenal is DMR. Now DMR is modeled in your framework manager model. And this is truly a relational technology. It doesn't make a separate copy of the data in a cube layout like the first two do, but it is able to read any layout of relational data that you can model. It can run on dynamic query mode, but doesn't have to. If you do run on dynamic query mode, it will make extensive use of caching for you, and that can increase throughput. But you don't have to use dynamic query mode for DMR data sources, and not all relational databases are supported in dynamic query mode, so this makes this a very flexible tool. This expresses your relational data as though it were a cube. And in doing so, if I'm writing a highly summarized report, it will summarize all of my low-level data to the highly summarized level for my report. It does that automatically, and it writes that SQL for me. However, it is not aggregate aware. Therefore, it's always rolling up from the lowest level of data. So this is there's a performance trade-off between real-timeness of the data, because this is reading the database every single time, and not reading it a separate copy. But it's also going to roll up from the lowest level of data to get to a summarized report. So there's a performance trade-off versus real-time. All three of these are in your arsenal. All three can be mixed and matched, and they come and are available for use out of the box with BI. In addition, IBM has a couple of other cubing technologies. There's DB2 cubing services. There is TM1, which is part of the financial planning side of life. That is a read it and write type cube. It's memory-resident that you could write BI reports from, and there are a lot of third-party cubes that Cognos can read natively. And as an author, it doesn't matter. Whatever the cube is, the cube is. The way it manifests, the way I write my reports with it is independent of the particular technology or vendor. So I've got these OLAP data sources. I need vocabulary now to describe them because they're not tables and rows and columns. They're cubes and with intersections, and those intersections are where I store measures. Measures are numbers that I can aggregate. They're the interesting measurements that I take in my company. They could be the number of orders, it could be the number of people I've hired, could be my revenue versus planned revenue, could be quantity of products in inventory. Whatever the interesting measure I want to aggregate is, that would live in an intersection in a cube. Now, how I get to the right intersection is based on dimensions. So dimensions represent my business context. They could be time, they could be region, they could be person-based, they could be literally anywhere you examine your business can be a dimension. And a lot of times, the way we look at our business is hierarchical. Certainly calendars are hierarchies. We don't really necessarily think about them. But, I hang a calendar on my fridge, and, it's a collection of 12 months, which is a year. So the year is broken down into 12 months. I look at individual month, that's broken down into weeks for me, and I look at a week, that's broken down into days for me. That's a hierarchy. We might have sales territories that are country and region based. We might have products that are organized into product lines and product types. We tend to organize our businesses into hierarchies. And we can express those hierarchies in our dimensions in our cube. And what's cool about that is I can then examine the intersections at different levels of those hierarchies. And as I move up and down those hierarchies and I look at intersections for different components of those levels, I end up with interesting intersections that may teach me something about my business. Opportunities, It could be about things that are going well or things that are going poorly, and that gives me a chance to make good business decisions based on interesting intersections. So dimensions let me index to measures, and dimensions are hierarchical, and hierarchies are made up of levels. So if we take a look at the picture on the bottom of the screen, that is a date dimension, and that date dimension happens to have two hierarchies. The left hierarchy has three levels: year, month, and day. So each of those is considered a level in the hierarchy. On the other side, the second hierarchy in this date dimension is year, quarter, month, day. Both are valid ways to look at, in this case, time. It's just that for some reports, my drill tab, when I want to break down a year, I want to break it down into months. And for other reports, maybe when I look at years, I want to be able to break them down into quarters as I traverse the hierarchies. So it's normal to have multiple hierarchies, but I have to say that by and large, most dimensions have one, and as a rule, a dimension has to have at least one hierarchy in it when you define it. Now, when I write a report, I can write a report by dragging a level onto my crosstab. So if I would like to see all of the months in the cube, independent of year, I would drag the month level from either hierarchy onto my report. Or I could drag the year level on. The only way to write reports, though, is to only take some months or some years from those levels. That would be called a member-oriented report. And members are specific values in a dimension level. So a particular date, August 1st, 2006, is a member of the day level of a time hierarchy. SKU 1, 2, 3, 4 would be a member of the product level of a product hierarchy, and so on. Now, those values, SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, Northeast, US, 8/1/2006, those individual values, we call those members of those levels. So we don't call them values, we don't call them columns, we don't call them data items, we call them members. And the visible description, this United States or SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, that name, we call that a caption. And when you look at a cube and you examine its members, what you're seeing typically is a list of the captions. And behind every caption lives a fully qualified reference to that member called a member unique name. And usually the member unique name, or MUN, as you'll hear us call it, ends in the business key that describes the, let's say, product line. So it might end with a 100. Now, I don't want to express a 100 on a report. I don't want to see that business key per se, because it doesn't tell me what I need to know. But if I see product line is camping equipment, and its internal business key is 100, and the member camping equipment has a member unique name that is fully qualified for the product dimension, the product line level, and business key 100, that's the difference between a MUN and a member caption. Either way, those are both attributes of the members. And members are values in a level. Now, when I write reports, think crosstabs for a minute, think rows and columns. I drop years in my columns, I drop product lines in my rows, and I have a collection of intersections. Another way to say that is a collection of tuples. They're an interchangeable term. An intersection or a tuple is, if you will, an intersection from my cube that is addressed by the member values in my row and my column. So, if I have a four-dimensional cube like I have in the picture here, where I've got time, region, country, and product, with revenue as my measure in the middle, and I put revenue in my crosstab as the default measure, and I put dates across the top and products across the side. I'm leaving it out my region and my country dimensions, right? And that's okay. What Cognos does is it says, all right, for any missing dimensions in a crosstab, I am going to make an assumption that you want the default member from the missing dimensions. Now, what's the default member? Well, when I design the cube, I get to set that. The default for most cube technologies is a member that represents all values in the dimension, or what we'll call the all member. So when I create a crosstab from a cube data source in my report, and I drag two of my four dimensions onto my crosstab, the missing two dimensions will default to the default member for them. Often, but not always, the all member. And that's how my crosstab comes up with numbers in those intersections. Because you see, to get a number out of a cube, it needs a full address. And it will aggregate data for the missing dimensions based on the default number for those dimensions. So it's a whole different way of thinking about your report, isn't it? I don't have to think about default numbers in a relational world when I create a crosstab. But in a cube, that's very important, because what if the default number isn't all? Or what if the default number is actually not something that is aggregatable? What if my dimension is a list of currencies? Right? My default number in a dimension that is currencies might be US dollars. Right? And what if I wanted it to be Canadian dollars? Well, I better express that dimension in my report, or my report will be US dollars, because the all number isn't there. It is actually a specific number, US dollars, in the case of that hierarchy. So it's a very different way of thinking as you write reports. Now, once I start talking about collections of members from a particular level or a particular hierarchy, I start talking about the notion of those members as individuals, and those members as a set. Formally, a set is a collection of one or more identically formed tuples that have references to the same hierarchies in them. But more commonly in a report, I think of sets as collections of members that I've control-clicked and dragged from my model onto my report. Why would I bring sets onto my report? Because sets, by their very nature, filter my report. Think about a report where I'm writing, and I've clicked on camping equipment and mountaineering equipment, and dragged just those two members from the model onto my report. I have now filtered my report to just those two product lines, simply by virtue of dragging that set of members from the model to my crosstab. So filtering is very straightforward, because I can filter by virtue of dragging members from a level onto my crosstab and expressing them as a set. And because I've expressed them as a set, as opposed to two individual numbers, I can also put an aggregate on their edge. So I could total those two up, and I could get the total for those two product lines on my report. However, as individual members, they're not aggregatable. I'll show you that when we get to our demo. So I can demo though, I got to show you that there are two views of the source tree in the tools, both in Report Studio and in Cognos Workspace Advanced. The first view is called the Members Only view. And you'll notice there are buttons above any package that contains a cube. We'll have extra buttons at the top of the Insertable Objects pane. And it's the first four buttons that we're going to talk about, what they do relative to cubes, because they're only used in an OLAP/cube type data source. They'd be ignored when you use the relational portion of the package if you have a package that's got both types in it. Which of course you can do, by the by. I can mix and match them in the same package. I can't mix and match relational and OLAP in the same object, same crosstab, for example. But I can have a cube in a relational package and write one crosstab from the cube and one crosstab from the relational. That's fine. But these buttons only apply to the cube part of that package. First button is the members only button. It tells us to express the dimensions, like in this picture products, and show me the first level, the members in the first level, which are these members here, these product lines. It allows me to traverse the tree. If I expand camping equipment, I will see the product types under camping equipment. So this members view would allow me to very easily write reports where I click on camping equipment, control click on outdoor protection, drag it into my report, bada bing. So I'm actually seeing data, I'm seeing members in my source tree in my draggable area, which is unique. Certainly don't see that in a relational world. This is one view of the data. The second view of the data is when I click this second button, and that is called the full package view. I think of it as the view that shows me the structure of the dimension. Because the dimension, notice I've got totally different icons. The dimension here, not only do I have a members folder, which will show me the same thing that I'm seeing in the members only view, but it also shows me the structure. So I see how many levels there are. I don't know if there's 3, 4, 5, or 8 levels below camping equipment in the members only view, but I can see the hierarchies and the levels in the hierarchy, and the members at each level in this full package view. And as a result, that's the only view I use when I write reports, because I can get at members, I can get at the structure and use the levels to my advantage. And so I can write all reports from the full package view. I can only write member level reports easily from the members only view. So when I teach the classes on dimensional reporting in both CWA and Report Studio, I teach the full package view. But reading it is a bit daunting. This was very friendly because it's got my business data right in front of me. This, until I get used to it, is not particularly friendly. So let's give a quick look at how we read that package view. So the top line here, that's the package. This is the package that only contains one cube. And this cube has a year dimension. And you see in this view, all your dimensions have three-headed arrows. That's the icon that will tell you it's a dimension. I mentioned earlier that a dimension has to have at least one hierarchy. It can have as many as necessary. This particular picture shows a dimension called years with three hierarchies: a year's hierarchy, a current month hierarchy, and a last month hierarchy. Hierarchies are these stacked blue boxes. Now I can drag a hierarchy onto a report, and I'll show you that in the demo. And that gives me a couple of options, one of which I can come in handy from time to time. But it is unusual in my experience to actually drag a hierarchy onto your report. Far more common to drag members and levels. But let's continue learning how to read the package. Hierarchies are stacked blue boxes. When you expand a hierarchy in a dimension, you will see a members folder. And if you open this members folder, you will see the members at the very first level, and they'll all be expandable, so I can see their children and their children's children in a hierarchy, very much the same way as I see it in this members view. But you see, I've also got access to the levels below directly. So this particular hierarchy has a years level. This is that all level I talked about as being the default for missing dimensions. This dimension has an all level, and this member could be the default member for this dimension, because there is one member at the all level. It's named the same as the level, called years. When I expand years, I'll see one member. Expand that member, I'm going to see all the years in the cube, because that's the next level down. And then when I expand one of those years, I'll see its quarters. And when I expand one of its quarters, I'll see its month. So this members view and the members view on the previous screen are essentially the same. That's why I say with the full package view, I get all the benefits of the members view plus all the power access to the structure. So if I wanted to write a report that was all the months in the cube, I could just drag this level on my report, making it very, very easy to get to the exact data I want without having to work with the levels in between the top and the bottom. Each level has a members folder that shows you the members that occupy that level, independent of their parent. Another powerful thing. Within each level, I've also got, potentially, things called member properties. Now, if you are observant, you might see that these icons actually match data item icons in a relational package for textual data, attribute data. And these are indeed attributes, and these would be used, for example, to express information about a member. Consider, for example, a member that represents a product. Its MUN will have the product ID. Its caption will have the product name. But sometimes I want to write a report that would be for only products that have been introduced since a particular date, or only products of a particular size, or maybe only products of a particular color, I suppose. Those attributes, those descriptors about a member, are what we store in member properties. Depending on the cube technology you use, you will have more or less access to properties. Some technologies will let you create as many properties as you want for a level. Some limit you in terms of the number of properties you can create. But the notion here is that these allow me to filter to get only particular members that match a property in my report. So yet another way to filter data is to filter using member properties. But hierarchies in dimensions with member folders and levels with member folders and member properties. And once you get used to reading this view of the data, you're going to find writing reports from cubes is going to be very, very straightforward, and you'll have a lot of power in terms of auto-filtering your report, as well as making your report dynamic. Now, that's the first two buttons of the four interesting buttons that appear above your data on the insertable objects pane. The third button over talks about whether when I insert members from the source, am I inserting them as a set or as individual members? And there's reasons that I might or might not want to insert a set for an individual member. And it'll be easier to explain that when I'm showing you as opposed to just from a picture. So I'm going to put that off just a smidge. And then the last button that is important here, this is the button that controls what happens when I drag one and only one member from the source tree. So I drag capping equipment. What am I going to insert when I drag the camping equipment member? Am I going to insert just that member? Am I going to insert all of the product types for camping equipment and then the camping equipment member? Or am I going to insert just the product types for camping equipment, not camping equipment itself? So three options there. In Cognos Workspace Advanced, the default is insert member with children. If that's not the behavior I want, I need to change this option. When I control-click multiple members and add them, it's this button, this third button, that controls whether they come over as individual separate members in my report, or whether they come over as a set of members. And then these two first buttons control the view of my package. One last concept before we get to the demo, and that is this notion of drilling up and down. I have hierarchical data, dimensions, that are indexing my measures. And sometimes I want to see data at different levels. And when I start a report and I see a report that's lanterns, maybe what I want to do is understand this $6 million number by the products that make up my lantern's product type. So I would drill down by double-clicking in Cognos Workspace Advanced, and I would see all the products that make up the lantern's product type. On the other hand, I might be interested in seeing the numbers by all the other product lines. So I may drill up on camping equipment to see all of his siblings, or the peers at the level product line in my queue. Okay? So drilling up and drilling down allows me to leverage the hierarchies and the levels in those hierarchies to expand or contract my data and see interesting intersections at different levels of my business hierarchies, thereby allowing me to find interesting intersections that are actionable, or that I might flip over to my relational data to get the details behind, since queues tend to be more summarized than my relational data would be. So drilling up and down is automatically on in CWA, because CWA has this preview mode notion. And in preview mode, drilling is always enabled. Now, in Report Studio, I don't have a preview mode. To test a report, I have to click the Run button. And I'm going to call clicking that Run button, running the report in consumer mode. I have the Run button in CWA as well. So I can run the reports I've been authoring and seeing data in preview mode. I can also run that report in consumer mode. Drilling by default is not enabled when you run a report in consumer mode. To turn on this drill up and drill down capability in consumer mode, I actually have to, on a report-by-report basis, enable it, going to the data menu item and choosing drill options. Here I'm showing the CWA dialog. We would have to check allow drill up and drill down. That's truly allow drill up and drill down in consumer mode. Unchecked, that means that your users will not be able to drill. What they see is what they get. Check it, and they'll be able to drill up and down on that report and leverage the hierarchies in the queue source. So with all of that said, let me switch over to Cognos Workspace Advanced, where I have created a new report based on a power play cube, a power cube, that's got a number of dimensions. Now, in the members view, my dimensions have a different set of icons than in my full package view. In the members view, if I expand products, I will see my product lines, camping equipment, mountaineering equipment, and so on. And if I would like to, I could control-click on a few of these guys and drag them onto a report. Now, this report will be filtered to just those three product lines automatically, simply by virtue of creating this set of product lines by control-clicking them and dragging them on. The question, though, is did they get added to my report as a set or as individual members? Well, that's what this third button is for. It is currently inserting sets. If I want, I can click it, and it will flip it to inserting individual members. So you see the brackets around the button? That tells me it's inserting sets. When I select these guys, I notice that the one I click turns dark orange, but the other two click light orange. Let me contrast that. I'm going to undo. I'm going to change this to not inserting sets. I'm going to drag the same three items over into my rows. Now when I click on them, you note that each one turns orange individually, and none of them turn yellow. So that's another visual cue that this is now three individual members, not a set of members. Why would I care? What is it that a set gives me or doesn't give me is a reasonable question to ask. Why I care is because I'm going to go ahead and insert a measure here. Okay. I can add an aggregate to my crosstab if I have a set. Sets have edges on which I can place an aggregate. Members do not. So let me delete these members. You'll notice I have to delete them individually because they're separate objects. I'm going to go back to inserting sets. I'm going to grab these same three members, drag them on. They're now a set. When I select the set, I can go ahead and add an aggregate on them and total them up. Let me add some columns so that will turn on. I'm going to add a couple of years. We'll drag those guys on. So I'm going to go ahead and add an aggregate, an automatic summary. So with a set, I can add summaries. Now, let me start a new crosstab, and I'm going to insert the same members, but not as sets. So I'm going to turn off sets. I'm going to add my members. I will come down here and add my members. And it won't let me aggregate unless I have a measure, so let me drag that on. Now, it will appear as though I can aggregate, and you notice it's not a set, only camping equipment is highlighted. When I try to add a summary, however, it will tell me I cannot. Because I can't add a summary to a single member. I can only add summaries in crosstabs to sets. So that's one of the reasons why I insert sets, as opposed to not. And that's what this third button controls. Let me start a new crosstab and talk to you about the fourth button. The fourth button only applies when I am dragging one and only one member from the source tree. So it's currently set to the default for CWA, which is insert member with children. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to drag one and only one member, because that's the only time this button matters. When I drag camping equipment and put it on, it is going to give me the children of camping equipment, that would be the product types, and camping equipment. So it's giving me the member that I picked, plus its children. Now notice that these are all individual members. Why? Because I'm not creating sets. So the second button still applies. The third button still applies. Let me create them as sets. Do the same thing. The difference is now that's a set. This is still an individual member. Why did I get children and the member? That's the fourth button's job. Let me change it to insert single member. I'll undo. Now I'll just drag one member over. I think I get one member. Not a set, can't be a set. A single member isn't a set. But I can get one member by changing this fourth button. And then finally, just to round this all out, I'll do the insert children option. So here I won't even see camping equipment in my report. I will just see, because of the third button, a set of the product types for camping equipment. Okay? So when I do member-oriented reports, they auto-filter. This report will only ever be for the children of camping equipment. It will never be for anything else. So it's auto-filtered by the members that I've added. So that's part of this member orientation that is powerful. The other part of it is that whenever I add a set of members, and by the by, a set of members doesn't have to all come from the same level. I can add members from any level of the same hierarchy to my report. Right? I can mix and match across the levels. They have to be from the same hierarchy, and therefore the same dimension, but they don't have to be from the same level. And then I could, because this is a set, if I finish my crosstab, I can add an aggregate to it. So a member-oriented report is auto-filtered. So what's wrong with a memory-oriented report? Well, wrong is a strong word. What do I have to be careful of? I have to be careful of whether a report is dynamic or not. You see, when I inserted my children of product line, so, whoops, I'm going to create another one. When I inserted my children of my product line, and I said give me member and children and create sets, what I would tell you is that this set is dynamic. In other words, if they add a new product type for camping equipment tomorrow when I rebuild my cube, it will automatically show up on my report. On the other hand, if I'm not creating sets and I do the exact same thing, these numbers are static. Today, these are the children of camping equipment. If I added a new product type tomorrow, when the cube rebuilds and I run this report, it will not automatically show up, because these are individual numbers that were added to my report. Let me show it to you a different way. If I look at the structure of this report, you'll see that what's listed here is individual numbers. Right? There are 6 individual numbers on this report. If I undo and add with sets being built, camping equipment, and I look at the actual design, you'll see that my children is a function. And so this function will always return the most current list of children in the cube. So turning on sets or not turning on sets can be the difference between a static report and a dynamic report in terms of auto-updating when the contents of my cube changes. So that's another reason why I care about whether I'm inserting sets. Let's flip to our other view and take a look at what's interesting there. It's a different view. Like I said, it takes some getting used to, but if I wanted to use the product numbers, I could expand the members folder, and these are exactly the same numbers, and I can do exactly the same stuff I just did from this view. So this view encompasses all the functionality of the other view. But the power of this view is also in, I now see the structure of products. It's got the all member, the product line level. That's actually a level, and in it I have the all member. And the children of the all member are the product line members, and so on. But you'll also see I've got a product type level and a product level. So if I wanted to write a report that just showed me all the product types, I can add it. Let me go back into preview mode, and you'll see there's all the product types. And you see by dragging the level, it gave you the product types independent of their parent, which can be a powerful thing when I'm writing a report. Now, these were added as a set, and I can operate on a set. Suppose the report that I want is the top 10 product types. Another good reason to insert sets. If I right-click on the set and choose Edit Set, I can add a top 10 filter. So let me do top 10. And then I can do a top 10 based on something, based on an intersection in my queue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it based on revenue. And it's going to be based on revenue in 2010. So I'm going to return from this filter the top 10 product types based on their 2010 revenue. So I have this whole edit set thing. So there's my top 10. Now, what if I didn't want to include temps? If temps were something I wanted to exclude, I could add an exclusion. And I could say, that's all good, but what I want to exclude are temps. So it will give you the top 10 exclusive of temps. So if temps is in the top 10, it's going to remove it, and I will have a top 9. If temps is not there, I will have a top 10. Okay? And now this is a set. I can put an aggregate on the bottom, and so on. So set logic, set filtering with this right-click edit set is another reason why sets are good. And you see product type level is dynamic. Every time I run this report, any new product types will be automatically included. Any deleted product types will be automatically removed from this report. So there's a dynamic component to sets, there's a set editing component to sets, and there's an aggregate component to sets. So adding sets is typically what I want. Not necessarily always. Sometimes a member-oriented report with individual members makes sense, especially if I want to do math across members. But maybe that's another webinar. Now, the other stuff that I can do with a cube, of course, is I can add calculations. If I go to my toolbox and I add a query calculation to my report, though you're going to see something different than you would see if this were relational data. You're going to get this dialogue that asks you, well, what's the return going to be from this calculation? Are you creating a new member? Are you creating a calculated measure? Are you going to do a definition of a set? Or are you going to do something else? So this is different than the relational style of reporting as well. You need to tell Cognos what your query calculation is returning. But you can do calculations that way. Another way to do calculations would be by member. So let me go ahead and I'm going to add two members. By expanding my rear level, I'm going to bring over 2012 and 2013 by control clicking and dragging. Now, by doing the two members at a time, the fourth button is ignored because that's just the one member guy. By doing them with sets turned on, they'll come over as a set. Then I could click on 2012, control click on 2013, and click my match button. Oops, I need a measure or it's not going to work. Sorry about that. Let me drop a measure in. Now I should be able to click on my match button. And, oh, no, they're set. See, I was trying to illustrate why you wouldn't add a set. Here's why. I add them as a set. What I want to do is 2012 minus 2013. As a set, it's not going to let me do that. So I'm going to turn off creating sets. I'm going to turn on 2012 and 13, drag them in. And now, when I control click them, Cognos will try to guess what it is I would like to do with them. Do I want to add the numbers, subtract the numbers, and so on? Do I want to do a percent difference? Or do I just want to do 2012 as a percent of 2013? I'll do a percent difference. Okay? So, sets have a lot of power, but individual numbers let me do math. And that's a critical component to this as well. So that's a reason why I might want to do individual numbers. Okay? So it is very common to mix numbers and sets in the same crosstab to get at the exact data that I want. Moving on to additional filtering options. Now, this is a perfectly fine crosstab, and it does what it does. Now, I will remind you quickly what's going on here in terms of default behavior. This crosstab has an intersection for time, these two members, for product type, these 9 members, and this is revenue, so that's the measure I'm pulling out of the intersection. And I've got a calculation, and that's a beautiful thing. But what that means is I have representation from the year's dimension and the product's dimension. I have no representation from the sales regions, the retailers, the margin range, or the currency. So what does this intersection truly represent? This intersection represents this set of years, this set of products, the default number for regions, the default number for retailers, the default number for margin range, and the default number for currency. So these are all defaults that are implied by the context of my crosstab. Now, what if I want to add to this context, but I don't want it to be visible in the crosstab? Another way to say that is, suppose I want to filter this to different intersections, but I don't want to add those numbers to my crosstab. Well, that's what this context filter dropdown up here is for. It allows me to add to every tuple on my crosstab the numbers that I drop up here from the dimensions that I don't already have in my crosstab. That's the best practice, is not to overlap the dimensions in your crosstab with the items you put in your context filter. So, for example, if I wanted to limit my data to just a particular sales region or two, I could go to my members folder, and let's say I'm going to limit my data to just my Europes. I'll drag that set to my context filter. And now you see it has filtered my crosstab. It has added these guys to the tuples that are aggregating here. I'm still having default values for the tuples for retailers, margin range, and currency. But now I have added in specific numbers for the intersections to be summarized in my crosstab from my sales regions dimension. So that's what a context filter is it adds members to all your tuples that are summarized in the intersections on your crosstab. Now, could I have dragged these and nested them into my crosstab? Of course I could, and they would now be part of my crosstab. The context filter, though, is specifically for those members that you would like to use to filter the results of your crosstab, but you don't want visible on your crosstab. All right? And I see that we're starting to run out of time, so Jesse, at this point, I think we should take a couple questions.
Okay. Great. So as I mentioned earlier, anyone who has additional questions, please enter them through the chat window. We've got time for a couple questions here. The first one, Rich, is on technology. So can Cognos Workspace Advanced work with OLAP technologies other than Cognos? Can we use other OLAP data sources?
Well, it sure can. So I went over in a little bit of detail the ones that come from IBM. But you can create data sources for Microsoft Analysis Services, for Essbase, for there's several other cube technologies that Cognos can read. The way you get them into a package is the same way as you do these other technologies. You must publish them in a package in order to use them. So you put it in a framework model, you add the data source to the Cognos connection, you go to the framework model, you add the cube from the data source, you publish a package, you can write a report. And once it's in the report, it doesn't matter what technology it is, the model is the same, so you've got the two views, you've got the other two buttons for inserts, that's all the same regardless of the technology. So yes, Cognos understands its own plus a bunch of other vendors.
Okay, the next question is, looks like someone is using Analysis Studio today. Is there any migration for folks that are existing Analysis Studio reports to move into TWA, or are they going to reauthor as part of that?
There is absolutely a migration path. One of the things you can do with a Query Studio report, or an Analysis Studio report against the cube for that matter, both of them actually, it works. Both of them have an option to open the report in Report Studio. And when it does that, it converts that report to Report Studio, and then you can save it. Now, any Report Studio report can be opened in either CWA or Report Studio. So by virtue of doing that convert to Report Studio step in those two tools, I can save a new copy of the report in Report Studio format, and in CWA and Report Studio can both edit that report.
Great. So here's a question just about the differences between CWA and Analysis Studio. Can you highlight some of the things that CWA can do that Analysis Studio could not?
Sure. So Analysis Studio, just from a pure functionality perspective, there's maybe two big gaps that people will recognize in Analysis Studio. One is Analysis Studio doesn't have any conditional formatting capability, whereas CWA does. The second is that Analysis Studio doesn't have the notion of page layers, and CWA does. Now, I didn't go over this in my demo, but a page layer, think of a page layer as a context filter that does one more thing, and that is gives me a page per member in the filter. So when I drag those three Europes into my context filter, I got one crosstab, one page, that summarized all three Europes. Had I dropped that in the page layer drop-down on the left side of the context filter, I would have gotten three crosstabs, one per Europe. So the page layer does double duty. It does page breaks and it does context filtering. Analysis Studio has neither of those capabilities. Now, in addition, Analysis Studio expresses your model in the members-only view. So when you go to Analysis Studio, you open your cube, you expand the model, you see the dimensions, it's just members. It's not the structural view. So CWA gives you the two views, and like I told you earlier, the full model view, the one that shows you the members folders plus all the structures, is a far more powerful tool for writing reports than the members-only view is. So with CWA, you get the power of that second view of the model as well.
All right, Rich, the next question, and this will be our last one, we're just about out of time. Again, anyone with additional questions, you can either reply to our follow-up email, just an email format with a question, or ask them through the chat window again, and we'll attempt to follow up with you directly after the webinar. This next question is around detail filters. So can you use detail filters in CWA?
That's actually kind of a controversy. The technical answer is yes. And you might recall I showed you member properties, and I said you might want to filter your report on only products that have been introduced since a particular date, or only products of a particular size. And we will do that by creating a detail filter that references the member property. And you would do that in Report Studio right in the query, you drag it over into the filter, and you drop it, and you do a regular detail filter. Now, OLAP purists will tell you that detail filters really slow down your cube because they're really a relational filter on a dimensional object, and that they should be avoided. I guess I'm not a purist because I believe this is why member properties were invented, and it is the proper way to use them. And if you look at the syntax of the lingua franca for accessing a cube, which is a multidimensional expression, that's like SQL for cubes, is this MDX. These detail filters are absolutely part of the MDX spec. So for me, I don't avoid using detail filters on cubes, especially when I'm using member properties. However, if I'm not using member properties, you should use context filters and splicers and page layers, and filter and set expressions first before you use detail filters. As long as they're familiar, but they're not the most efficient way to filter a cube.
Okay, well, let me thank everyone for attending today. Rich, thanks for putting this together and sharing with everyone in today's webinar. Again, we'll send a follow-up email that's going to have a link so you can watch this online. Alternatively, you can go right to our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, you'll get alerted when we post it. Be sure to go to lpa.com events to sign up for future events, and thanks again for attending today's webinar.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great one.